What's going on, guys? I'm Kristen Dunsmore, and I'm here with Garrett Blevins from Evolve and Marcellus Williams, aka the Swolefessor. And he also owns Craftsmanship. So thank you for being on here tonight. I think we kind of spoke earlier that we want to chat about just your coaching style, even just from your training philosophies, just from also personality too, I think is important. I think when I'm working with athletes, there's definitely like a personality type. How do you interact with them depending on, someone who's maybe type A versus like a type B?
Yeah, so I'm fairly adjustable, I'd say, to different personality types, and I think that's reflective in just the wide variety of people that I work with having a bigger roster. And truth be told, I've always been that way. Like even as a
Mhm.
kid, like I'll never forget, like in high school, it's like people have groups or cliques. I had multiple groups of people. Like, oh, hey, here's who I work out with. Hey, here's who I discuss politics with. Here's who I play video games with. Who's here I discuss theology with. Like, I've always been that way, just because I'm generally interested in a lot of different things. And you might have a friend who's really interested in one aspect, but then they don't really care about this other thing. So it's like, okay, well, I'll go talk to somebody else about that. So I feel like in terms of personality type, I can work with anyone for a personality type. There's more so there's just basic things that I look for in the sense of you can be someone where you're very introverted, you can be more extroverted. What I care about is can you do the things that I need you to do to help you reach your goals, right? The basic stuff like communication, sending your videos on time, keeping your sheets filled out. So long as they can do that, I can be pretty flexible. I have some clients that might be more like, like an Ashton, where like if he kind of gets in his head, I kind of have to talk to him like a soldier because that's his background,
Yeah.
right? But then I have my client Leanne, where she's a nurse, where if she's having a hard time, I have to be talk to her a little bit more like the way she might talk to a patient, being very empathetic and stuff like that. And I think one of my giftings as a coach is being able to kind of put on those different hats and still be myself, still be me, but kind of just be able to read someone and know like, okay, well, how can I approach this in a way where I'm still being direct, I'm putting out the information I need to, but in a way that they can be receptive to. And I think a lot of that just has come from just having very diverse friends group from a very young age, different friends of different cultures and backgrounds. So you kind of just are used to that.
Yeah. What how would you say like an athlete who is struggling, they have like that mental barrier, they're gonna hit their like top set, right? And something like the day before, it's like this big anxiety and like, oh my God, this is my top set, or I got a competition. Like, how do you kind of bring them back to earth?
Yeah, I'm very big on figuring out the why behind things. So kind
Yeah.
of like with programming, where it's like, okay, this works, but I don't want to just know it works. I want to know why. I want to know why they feel that anxiety towards the top set. Because I think based upon if you can figure out why they feel that way, that determines how you can approach it, right? For some people, with a lot of my clients, maybe one of my neurotic clients, the reason why they put so much investment in their top sets and their performance is because maybe they don't have that much going on outside of powerlifting. So it's like this is the highlight of my day. This kind of determines the flow of my day. And with those people, I try to get them to kind of expand into other things in their life, right? To get more focused on that. Because it's like you can't have your entire Saturday ruined just because your top set didn't go the way that you want. You know what I mean? Like it's like,
But it
dude, like
does
you have friends,
sometimes.
you have family, you have things to go you can deal with. But so that's kind of like the more big picture. But in the small term, what I kind of with folks, I was like, hey, look, you've done the work to be ready for this set. Your week one went well. Your week two went well. Your week three went well. You slept. You ate. You've done everything that you're supposed to do. And all you can do now is just warm up, see how you feel, and make the best call from there, right? It's like if you stress yourself out before you even get to the set, it's kind of self-defeating. You're not going to move as comfortably, you're not going to move as naturally. Like a mantra that I've been saying for years is we treat heavyweight like it's light and lightweight like it's heavy, meaning same brace, same technique, same intentionality, and just reminding them of like you've already proven your capability. I wouldn't have given you this week four range if you haven't proven the capability to do it. Just warm up, trust yourself, and then execute, right? So in the more short term, that's how I look at it. But like I said, a lot of it's like, why do you feel that way? Because sometimes it's like I said, a consistent thing where they are maybe not too invested in training, they're not invested in other things. Other times it could be like it's just, oh, we're closer to a meet, so now I'm getting more in my head and things like that. And when that's the case, I just remind them like, well, hey man, your meet's just another SPD day without back-end blood, right? Things like that. So I'm really, there's lots of examples I could go into. I'm just very big on I want to figure out why you're feeling this way, and that way we can address it. Because if it's like a one-off thing, then it's like, okay, that happens to all of us. That happens to me. I've been powerlifting for 10 years and I'll still have some sets where I'm kind of starting to get in my head, right? And I may need to go rewatch an old set, like, okay, yeah, I can do this, I can move this. But if it's a consistent thing, there's probably a reason behind that that probably goes beyond just the lifting itself.
Because you work with both men and women,
Mhm.
and you work with, beginners who are just starting out to world champions. So you have like a vast majority of like individuals. So how would you, one would be like when you're dealing with a female coach versus like your guys, or do you program from them any differently?
Mm. So programming wise, no, not really. So here's what I try to explain to people. You're going to develop certain systems based upon archetypes, based upon the data that you have and the experience that you go through, right? Maybe it's a thing where you found that, hey, a lot of my 74 kg males do well with this structure. A lot of my, 63 females do well with this structure. You're going to have certain archetypes, but the thing is, that's just where you're getting your base structure to start with. Over time, you're going to cater to the individual. Like, for example, on average, we know that oftentimes female lifters can handle higher average intensities given the same sets of reps compared to their male counterparts because the objective loads just aren't quite as much and thus they can recover from it quicker, right? But that's not always true. Like, I can't go like, oh, you're a female, so I can just give you everything at 80% plus and just assume that's going to work. I have to look at the data, what's actually working for you, right? Same thing where it might be a thing where like, oh, you're a heavier weight male, so you can only squat once or twice a week, 3 times will be too much. It's like, well, if the data is telling me that, okay, we're doing enough on the primary and the secondary, but he needs another exposure somewhere to bridge the gap. Okay, I'm going to give him that third day. I'm not going to be like, oh, you're a heavier male, you can't handle it. So I'm very big on having your baseline structures based upon archetype, which is, of course, sex, age, um, training age, height, weight, they're leverages. So things of that nature give me a baseline, but ultimately I have questions that I ask the client. I have things that I look for on top of whatever data they're bringing me. And that's what's going to determine how I approach things from a programming standpoint. Because I have some clients where what I'm doing with them may seem like something that you would typically expect from a lighter weight female, but it's like a heavier male. I have other clients with the way I'm pacing their workload is something that you would think, oh, that works well for really lightweight lifters, and they're a heavier person. So I think the general differences would be, like I said, you can probably get away with higher average intensity with your female lifters on average. I will sometimes put a certain focus on upper body accessory work with my female lifters compared to my male lifters, just because oftentimes upper body mass can be what's holding a lot of female lifters' benches back. If we look at a lot of like female lifters with elite benches, like Megan Scallon's always like the easy one to look at. She's jacked, she's yoked, so it's like I think that's something where a lot of females, when they come to me, maybe they are used to pushing their lower body because they were doing that for their own aesthetic reasons, but maybe not pushing the upper body to the same degree. And I think about the fact that if I have a guy who's benching, 3 or 4 times a week, just the sheer load of what he's doing, he might get quite a bit of hypertrophy in the pecs and triceps from that alone. Whereas a female lifter, because the objective loads aren't quite as much, or they tend to have a shorter range of motion bench if they're arching more, things like that. Okay, I need to bridge the gap, but maybe a little bit more accessory work on that end, right? So there's things of that nature. And then there's certain recovery factors that we may have to consider, but once again, that's a spectrum as well. And then like mentally, psychologically, not at all. I have I have some female lifters where like they are like the easiest to work with because like they don't get as neurotic about certain things. They're just like, yeah, whatever you tell me to do, coach, I'll do it. That's fine. And then I have other ones where they're worse than some of my male lifters when it comes to that. So I think a lot of stereotypes have been put out there personality wise about like, oh, female lifters act like this, male lifters act like that. I'm like, y'all just haven't worked with enough people. I promise you, it is a spectrum. I've got some dudes that will be, will literally get emotional, like if a lift doesn't go the way they want. I have other female lifters like, whatever, I'm gonna handle my friends with this anyway. I don't care. So it's just like, and the stereotype I think would often be seen as the opposite, but it really does just depend on the individual. And then as far as like, beginner to like, like I said, beginner lifters to world level lifters, I have a lot of people where like, okay, you're a beginner intermediate level lifter, but you treat this like it's your full-time gig. And then I've got some world level lifters where I have to get them to remind them, hey man, you're about to go to worlds. Like let's lock it in, right? So it definitely depends. But from a programming standpoint, I would say things just get more nuanced the more experienced the lifter gets. The same basic principles are true for the moment you're a beginner all the way to being advanced. It's just the way you go about that can change. So for example, with a beginner level lifter, It's like you can do linear progression, right? You can hit the same stuff over and over, just add 5 pounds and progress really quickly, because all the aspects of fitness that you need, the strength, the skill component, the volume, the hypertrophy work, all of that can be addressed in that simpler structure. These are still the same aspects of fitness that someone like Bob Matthews has to hit. It's just the way we get that in is different. Okay, you know what? Your top end is a lot higher now. So whereas this beginner level lifter could do set, a 3x5 with 75 to 80% of the warm max often, we might start you with 60% of warm max because the sheer objective load is so much higher. Hey, before you could do this much squat volume because it wasn't beating you up, but now that the load is so heavy, we got to pull some of that squat volume back, give you belt squats instead. So it's still following the same principles. It's just, okay, what adjustments do we make to get that workload in? Because the basic principle of you have to do more over time is true for everybody, but what that looks like can vary based upon, how strong they are, their life circumstances, their longevity. Plus, more experienced lifters tend to oftentimes be older, right? Like when you're younger, your recovery variables seem kind of infinite because you're not an adult yet. You don't have kids, you don't have a full-time job. Your biggest responsibility might be going to class, right? But obviously, as we get older, we have to account for these variables a little bit more. So,
Yeah.
for
I'm
sure.
glad that you mentioned that because I think we were talking to Ashton about this last week. I mean, his training, like if you were just to look at it and there, like you knew nothing else about him and you looked at his program just as like a coach, you'd be like, what the heck is this?
Yeah.
Right? But like he also, I mean, if you know what's going on outside of the gym, I mean, he's like was in school, he has a kid, he's full-time military, like, and he was in school for a PhD. It wasn't,
Yeah.
like
He
just
only got
taking a
that
class.
year. We've been having to work with that
Yeah,
schedule for so long. And it's like, all right, cool, you're done with your PhD, but now you have a kid. So it's like
yeah.
replace
But
one variable for another.
I think it's really cool, but like it's important, I think too, is like you said, there's always like that the foundation of these training principles, but then I mean you adjust them based on, these individual differences, whatever. But like I think the big one is kind of the lifestyle factors outside of the gym, like having a family and how do you train around that? Well, like I can only squat once a week and I'm gonna, do a heavy single or, just this is all I got and it works. So I think that's really cool. The question that I have for you is how would you balance like um someone who like the comparison between hypertrophy and strength, like how much emphasis do you put on hypertrophy and then when do you decide when someone needs it and when we're going to focus strictly on strength training?
That's a great question. Um, so, true to the name, craftsmanship, crafting things up, things like that. And just because of my background is, because I realized over the years that a lot of powerlifting coaches who got into powerlifting, they kind of started with powerlifting. Like they learned their basic programming from powerlifting. That's not me. I got a lot of my background stuff from just doing a bunch of random programs on bodybuilding.com forums and hypertrophy. And like, I want to be strong on everything. I was like, oh, squat, bench, deadlift, those weren't the big three. It's like, oh, get strong on squat, get strong on bench, get strong on deadlift, get strong on chest press. That's a new row machine, get strong on that, right? And I've always been very big on the idea of I like when I got involved in like, yeah, I look at all these powerlifting programs. I'm like, wow, there's not enough accessory work in most of these. So I'm very big on the idea of hypertrophy always being a factor. There's certain phases where you may focus on it more than others, but I've not written a single block where there's not a decent amount of accessory work in there at some point. And there's a few reasons for that. So obviously, when it comes to just building muscle mass in general, we know that if we're talking about higher work capacity, higher potential force production, and thus higher potential top end, the more muscle mass you have, probably the higher your potential top end in general. That's true. But the other reason why I put a lot of emphasis on it is even when I'm trying to focus on strength, I have to ask myself, okay, if the goal is to maximize that top end potential, part of it is specificity, absolutely. And a big part of it is elevating fitness, but fatigue management is huge too. So if I can have somebody push the top set, push some back downs, and let's say those back downs are at say 70, 75% of their one rep max, right? I can do that and then make up the difference with accessory work and get the same top end result that I want, but at a lower fatigue cost. I'd rather do that than push the top set, push higher or heavier back downs or for more sets and then not have any energy for the back downs, even though it's like, oh, hey, you're being more specific. That should set you up to be stronger. Yeah, but will it really? Like, what's the fatigue cost ratio to that? right? So because of that reason, I'm always emphasizing some type of hypertrophy work. And I think it'll naturally take more of a back seat as the big three elevates up, right? Like a simple example is, let's say it's a 3-block macro. You do triples the first block on your SPD, doubles the second block, singles the third block, right? And let's say your back down started around week 1, 70%, and then by week 4, the 76% on like the first block. And let's say by the last block, you're starting at like 74%, finishing around 80%, just for an example. Okay, well, naturally, that first block with your excessive work, you're going to be able to push excessive work a lot harder because you're not going to feel as taxed post that SPD work. Whatever you're hitting for your top triple isn't going to be as heavy as your top single. And whatever your average intensity is for that first block is a lot lower than what's going to be for that final block, right? So you're pushing your excessive work. With each block, you can still keep that accessory work in to keep fitness up and bridge the gap, but you might naturally find that the exertions, if you keep exertions equal, that the loads you're doing on those might start to go down a little bit on some movements because the big three is taking more of a priority naturally anyway. And then the accessory movements where you can keep pushing them in alignment for all 3 blocks are probably stimulatory in nature anyway, and allowing you to continue to feel better on the big three. And that's the way I categorize accessory work. Is like, okay, some accessory work is for hypertrophy, yes, and that might take more of a backseat going into a peak block, but some accessory work is stimulatory. There's a specific stimulus we're getting from doing this that carries over directly to the big three. And then some accessory work is just for health, in which case I'm never going to take that out because it's keeping you feeling good, right? So I know it's a very long answer to your question, but
No, it's great. This is
yeah,
exactly what we want.
yeah, that's how I think about hypertrophy and accessory work. Like at no point, especially we're in the tested fat-ers, right? We don't have the luxury of being like, okay, I'm going to spend 3 to 6 months focusing on just hypertrophy, and then I'll have 3 to 6 months to focus on strength. Most powerlifters, unfortunately, a lot of my clients have been with me for years, but most powerlifters will do this for like 1 to 3 years. They'll do 2 or 3 meets. You need to be trying to work on all aspects of fitness at the same time as much as you can. As you get more advanced, you may have to have periods of times where you say, okay, this setup that allowed me to hit my intensity, my volume, my hypertrophy, I was rinsing and repeating it, great. But now I'm at a point where, okay, I need to address one of these aspects of fitness way more than the other. Then you may have to pull back and focus on that for a little bit, then come back to your usual style, right? But for most people that aren't at that level yet, it's like you should never be deviating away from hypertrophy. You need every block you can to focus on that and get bigger because you're a natural lifter. You're not running things in cycles where it's like, okay, I can just hop on this or that to make up the muscle mass later, right? So,
yeah. Marcellus, on that same thought, with the different types of accessory work, can you give an example like where you're trying to push the squat and then you're trying to have certain exercises that would be for hypertrophy and then certain exercises that are less taxing but are still working the same stimulus to support the squat, and give kind of example for the listeners exactly what you mean in terms of exercise selection for those different categories?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously what a movement that might be stimulatory for one person may be not stimulatory for somebody else, but a general example we can use is like, okay, if I'm focusing on, okay, the person's bottleneck is their leg mass. It's not the scale of squatting. It's not that they're lacking pop or anything like that, but it's like they just need bigger legs. Okay, that's when we can focus on things more like a pendulum squat, a hack squat, maybe even a leg press, right? Where maybe these things don't directly carry over to the barbell squat in that same type of way, but there's a lot of forward knee travel. There's a lot of work on the quads, full range of motion. They're great for growing the legs, right? And to a degree, depending on how hard you push it, you have to be careful where you place it, because if you push a hack squat too hard, say a couple of days before your primary squat, you're probably going to be feeling that, right? So you have to be careful with where you place that. If it's more like, okay, the focus of this is on hypertrophy, I'm probably going to put that closer to their primary day. So that way they can hit their primary day, they can hit that hypertrophy-based work, and then have like a week to recover from that before coming in, right? So whether it's like a hack squat or a pendulum, or maybe even a leg press, right? I know leg press is great for some, not others, based on your leverage, but in general. Whereas when we're talking about something that's more for a stimulatory impact, would be something like the belt squat, where it's like, okay, this belt squat is essentially part of your actual squat volume. There's no axial loading, but allows us to get in the same pattern and work squats in the same way to give you more specificity. Like, let's say it's like, hey, our leg mass is fine. That's not really an issue, but we need just additional squat volume to get in. But hey, I can't because my back gives, or my core gives, or my shoulders get before my legs do. Okay, cue the belt squat, right? Like using myself as an example, when I'm further out from a meet, I'm always going to have belt squat in there at least once a week because it is a pretty big part of my squat volume. But I might have like leg press or hack squat on the other day further out from the meet, trying to emphasize growth in the quads. But when I'm closer to meets, I'm belt squatting twice a week. I'm taking that leg press or hack squat and putting in more belt squats because it's allowing me to be more specific and get more of that volume in that I know allows me to feel really good and really strong and poppy out the whole of the squat, that I just don't get the same thing from like a hack squat or a leg press. The belt squat is what really does that for me, right? So that's the difference between something maybe being more for hypertrophy and then for stimulus. And if it's for hypertrophy, more often than not, when we're programming it, you're going to be getting closer to failure more often than not, because we know that's important for muscle growth. When something's more for stimulus, the way you pace that accessory doesn't necessarily have to be to failure. It might actually be very similar pacing as like a secondary squat day. So let's say, for example, a hack squat or leg press, you're pushing it to like RP, 8 pretty consistently, trying to get a hypertrophy stimulus. My belt squat might be something like RP 6 week 1, RP 7 week 2, RP 8 week 3, and then I pull back on it on the week 4 after I've hit my week 4 primary day, right? So how you pace your accessory workload depends on what it's for. If it's for hypertrophy, it's going to be pushed closer to failure more often than not. If it's for stimulus, you simply pace the RPE based upon, okay, what load do I need to touch on this? And what RP is that relatively to give me the stimulus that I need to feel good on the movement? And if it's for health, that's usually more static. It's probably going to stay around a lower RPE, consistent sets of reps, and you're getting it in just to feel good, right? That could be something as simple as like, a goblet squat, hip adduction, something like that, where it's purely just doing this movement helps me to feel healthy. That's what it's there for. But I'm very big on that because, there's oftentimes a lot of debate on like, oh, people push their accessories too hard, or, oh, they don't push them hard enough. I'm like, well, what is it for? One, what are you programming it for? Health, stimulus, or hypertrophy? But then two, what's the nature of the movement? Because even if something is for hypertrophy, you may still have to pace it. If somebody is doing like 2 or 3 sets of hack squats to RP9 all 4 weeks across their block, that's going to kill their squat. I would make the argument that even something like a hack squat, okay, you know what? If you're hitting a true RP like 7 for the rest of the tank, that's sufficient for hypertrophy for week 1. And then you can progress off that as the block continues to get more to that peak exertion without pushing it too hard. Whereas if we're talking something like a bicep curl, yeah, you can probably push it to RP9 across all 4 weeks. It's a bicep curl. You're going to be fine, right? So the nature of the movement also matters on top of what type of movement it is. Because I categorize accessories by natures too. I have what I call secondary main movements. These are movements where they could basically be their own big 3. That's things like an RDL, an incline bench, a weighted dip, right? Then there's your general compound accessories, lat pull downs, chest press, leg press. And then you've got your single joint stuff, curls, leg extensions, lateral raises, because they all have a different fatigue cost regardless of why you're programming them.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I basically think of those categories as how much does this exercise hurt me? And that's
a good way of looking at it. Yeah. Yeah.
If we call it fatigue, I just call it ouch. But yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. You brought something up in that discussion, which I'd like you to dig a little bit more in as well, which is how you structure your week and especially primary and secondary movements. Because when we talk accessories, and some people who talk about those, they'll put like pause squat or high bar squat as an accessory. But I think you might use a different term, like more of a secondary day movement, where it's very similar to the primary focus that you're trying to push, which in powerlifting, we've got the big 3. Can you talk a little bit about how you might set up a week and how, let's take the squat for example, how you might set that up with your primary day, your secondary day, and what exercises you have, and then how accessory exercises are going to fit within those 2 days as well, or throughout the week?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I don't consider things like a high bar or an SSB, stuff like that. I don't necessarily call those accessories. I consider those variations of the big 3, right? Like this is still a type of barbell squat, right? Or a pause squat. It's still a variation of it, right? And then an accessory would be something actually like, okay, a hack squat, a belt squat, a leg press, things of that nature. So when it comes to primary and secondary day, I'll start off with what I mean by that, because obviously different people have different context. So for me, the primary day is simply, this is the day that I want to see performing the best throughout the week. And this is also the day where I'm probably going to get the highest top end exposure. It does not mean that it's the day that necessarily has the highest average intensity. It doesn't have to be the day that has the most volume. It's simply, this is the day that I want to show up the best. Like for example, if I use Chris Perez, right? On his primary squat day, he just has his squat single. That's it. He doesn't have back downs or anything like that. He has bell squat on that day, but he doesn't have back downs. So technically speaking, that's his like lowest total workload day. But everything that we do on the secondary and tertiary is to build into making that day feel the best, right? So when I say primary, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be your heaviest workload across all sets. It just means this is the day where I want the top end to be performing the best, right? When I say secondary, it's simply referring to, okay, whatever day comes after the primary, where the purpose of that day is to produce a certain stimulus that feeds into that primary to make it feel better. Now, typically speaking, if it's just, primary, secondary, and only squatting twice a week, we probably are going to have back downs on both days because you have to do a certain amount of work on the primary day to make the secondary feel the way you want. And then that way the secondary can bridge into the following primary day. It's like a sequence of chains where you have to make everything link together. So for me, if I'm talking about, what, for the sake of your question, just squat, primary day squats are typically going to look like, okay, we're going to have a top set of typically anywhere from 1 to 3 reps. We can get as high as 4 to 5, but because the whole idea is I want there to be a certain level of intensity on the top end, I typically like to keep that around 1 to 3 reps, right? And how long we do triples compared to doubles, singles can just be on the individual. That's what the primary day is going to look like. Their back down sets can vary. It can be something like, 3 sets, 4 sets. The rep ranges are going to come down to more to the archetype of the lifter. The more well leveraged you are for the squat, probably the more rest I'm going to give you on your back downs. The less advantageous leverages you have for it, probably the less you have. So let's say something, for example, would be like a 3x5 or a 4x4. Typically speaking, I don't like to give someone more than 5 total sets of squats on a primary day session or really any given session. So if they already have a top set, they're probably only going to get 3 to 4 back downs at the most, right? And what those back downs typically are, and this isn't just for squat, this is for really most of what I do. I like to use percent of 1 rep max for the primary day because I like to have complete control over what that number looks like for the back downs and having good control, steady progression of it. So that way, if there's a range of what you're supposed to say on your top set, if you hit the low end, that's okay. You're still going to get the set weight you need on the primary day for the back downs. If you hit the high end and maybe you overshot a little bit, that's okay. You still got that control progression on the primary days, right? So I like to control that because I know there's a peak intensity that's probably going to make them feel good. I like to set that for, say, the end of the macro and then work backwards from there to know where I'm going to start them. So that's typically what the primary day will look like for the squat. The secondary day, there can be a lot of variation to this, right? But in general, the secondary day is there to provide whatever stimulus is needed to make them feel good on the primary. Some people, that secondary day looks like almost like a secondary intensity day because they respond well to intensity. You give them like a top set of 4, you give them like heavy back down sets of 4. That's what they need on the secondary to feel good on the primary. Some people need more volume. You give them a top set of 5, you give them 3 back down sets of 6 after that. It just depends. Some people need a little bit of both. Hey, we're going to give you a priming single, like a pause squat top set, and then you'll have like a comp top set of 5, and then your back down sets of 6, depending on what they need. And where that secondary day is going to be depends. More often than not, it's going to be no further than 3 days away from the primary, but typically speaking with high program, 2 days away from the primary. Because I find that, like, for example, let's say the primary squat is on Saturday. If I have their secondary squat on Wednesday, that 2 day of rest, Thursday and Friday is enough time to recover, but it's not so far away to where they can't carry that fitness well into the primary day. Some people can do 3 days, so maybe it's on a Tuesday. But what I find is the stronger somebody gets and the more those little nuanced things matter. That's kind of like we talked about the difference between a beginner and advanced lifter. If you're a beginner lifter, I can put your secondary squat on Tuesday, your primary on Saturday. It probably won't be an issue at all. I could probably put your secondary on Monday if I wanted to. But I want enough space between the primary and secondary for the secondary to be productive, but not so much space to where you're losing that fitness and adaptation, right? So typically a 2 day gap. But what that looks like typically, no matter what the top set is, whether it be comp squat, high bar, whatever, and that just depends on what their individual needs. If someone needs more specificity, it's probably going to be comp squats. If somebody, they find that getting the low bar position more than once a week because the sheer workload they do doesn't feel good, Ashton's a great example. He has high bar on the secondary day. Bob is a great example. He also has high bar on the secondary day. Then we'll do like the closest variation we can, high bar. If somebody is somebody like Petrie, where Petrie holds on to his skill of squatting really, really well. He can low bar once a week and feel fantastic. He doesn't have to high bar or anything like that. So what we found with him is SSB on his secondary day, we're doing that recently, is great because he just needs to feel something heavy enough on his back and to work his legs. The SSB is perfect because for Petrie, getting the low bar position and the high bar position too often causes him to bias towards certain imbalances that they can have him feeling really beat up over time, right? So what that secondary looks like can vary, but typically it's some type of top set with whatever variation is. And then their back downs are typically a % drop from that top set. So for some clients, it might be, a percent of order mass, but for most of them, it's going to be a % drop, typically around 12 to 15% drop from whatever their top set was. And the reason why I allow them to do this is because since I typically have their secondary days at a certain low cap anyway, I know that so long as they don't go past that low cap, that percent drop will be enough stimulus for them to feel good going to the primary, but it won't be like so light to where it's like not productive. So that's why I like to use the percent drop there. Plus, typically speaking, they're more fatigued on the secondary day, so they can't push such heavy workload to where like the percent drop is going to hurt them. Whereas on a primary day, when you feel really good, if I have them just do a percent drop, especially the type of jumps I have to make week to week, that can mean that your back downs go from being like, 170 kg week 1 to like 190 kg week 2. And that can be such a huge increase that it's not worth it. Whereas with the secondary days, especially since they tend to be higher reps on the top set, the back downs go up a little bit more steadily. So that's kind of how I like to gauge it.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, because if we're looking at force production as the adaptation, if you're, as you had said earlier before the call, if you're treating lightweight like it's heavy, and you're going and you're really putting in the effort and you're bracing and you're paying attention and you're really trying, I just think of like, try to lift the weight fast, not loose. Yeah. The forces that you can produce, even with fairly submaximal loads, can be very close to the force that you would produce with a maximal rep, as long as you're trying to accelerate the bar from the bottom of the lift as fast as you can. And so you can get a lot out of that without the extra fatigue that you're talking about mitigating. Because in everything that you're saying and everything you're talking about, it seems like that primary day, specifically the top set of that primary day, that specific exercise, that's what you want to be hitting and tracking. And so you're organizing the rest of these training principles around that to make sure that you're still giving stimulus for growth. You're not like tapering for that day necessarily, but you're also making sure that everything feeds together to push that particular piece forward. So who cares if the back offsets from that top set scale week to week linearly with the top set? If that hurts the top set, it's not worth it.
Exactly.
Stimulus if you're trying hard with lighter weights without the extra fatigue.
Exactly. And that's where the accessories come in to kind of bridge the gap too. Because, and keep in mind, like when I say submax, it's always relative, right? Like something I'm very big on is more is more when you actually get more out of it, right? If you can do extra work, but you're going to get the same result as if you had did 5% less work, then that's just being inefficient. So when I tell people less is more, I don't mean, do minimum effective volume, always go super light on your back downs, have very minimal reps. I'm not about that. But what I am about is like, if I know, if I have you between 70 and 75%, right, that you're going to get the same stimulus no matter what, whether I start you at 70 or 75%, I'm going to start you at 70. Because you're going to get the same benefit, but at a lower fatigue cost, and thus we can push for longer and build more momentum. Now, if you tell me, hey, you start at 75 or 70, you'll make 2% more progress each block. Well, of course, I'm going to start you at 75 so long as you can recover from me because there's something worth it there, right? But exactly, that's how I like to approach this. Like this top set is, yes, it's there for stimulus because we're getting a top end intensity stimulus to start off the training week, but we're also gauging how that's moving to know like where things are at. Because that top set doesn't have to be like super aggressive. Like, I know it's popular to see clients hit their really big week 4s. Something I've been doing a lot of clients lately is like, well, we're kind of pacing where you hit that big week 4 and it looks well under an RP 8 or 9. It was like RP 7, but that's okay. In the same way I look at it is like, was the week 3 load heavy enough for the week 4? Okay. Was the week 4 block 1 load heavy enough to set us up where we want on the week 4 block 2? And kind of stringing things together that way. So to get back to how I kind of program the accessories around that for the squat, typically speaking, if it's more about hypertrophy, like I said, I like to keep that heavier, more hypertrophy-based focused work on the primary day. Because once again, if I push like a hack squat or leg press or a pendulum, and I'm pushing that really hard and aggressively on that secondary day, and then only have a day or two to recover for the primary day, you might come in feeling really strong, but you might be overly fatigued in the legs. You're just really tucked, right? So if it's more hypertrophy based, okay, let me put that further away from the primary by having it on the same day as the primary, right? Or maybe like the day afterwards, depending on what the programming layout looks like. Whereas if something's more stimulatory in nature, like a belt squat, okay, well then I want that on the secondary day because I want you to feel that stimulus you're getting, which is the extra reps, the pop out of the hole from the belt squat. I want you to get down the secondary so you can carry that into the primary. If I were to flip it where, okay, I'm going to do the stimulatory thing on the primary day, well, okay, that's cool, but now you're going to have a whole week away from that. Is it going to feed in the way that you want it to, right? And then some people, they need both. Some people, like I said, they might belt squat on both the primary and the secondary. Some people, it might be a thing where, well, hey, the stimulus that I need isn't so much the squat practice. I just need a general bit of fullness in my legs. Okay, maybe a leg press is great for you on that secondary, right? So it's all about knowing, okay, what is the individual getting out of this movement? And that'll let you know where you put it. If it's more stimulatory in nature, and you need that stimulus to bridge the gap into the next session, that's where you'll know where to put that stimulus. If it's more of a general hypertrophy movement, then technically you just need to think about, okay, well, where can I push this the hardest for hypertrophy without it interfering with the day that I need to show up best? And that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, I think that can be missed by people sometimes when they're programming and they're thinking, okay, well, this is my primary day. Oh, where am I going to put my hypertrophy work? And they start looking at other days.
Yeah.
When you put it directly after the primary movement, that is literally as far away as possible as you can be from that fatigue impacting the next primary day.
Yep.
Yeah. So people will make that mistake sometimes in their program. They think everything has to be separate, and it's like, nah, you can weave that stuff together, especially if you just are working up to a top single, like some people do. And it's like, okay, that was the intent for like the thing that maybe was more intimidating or scary. That's done. Yeah. Now I go hammer my hypertrophy work because I have a whole week to recover before my next top set, sort of thing.
It's also about what keeps it productive. Like the way I look at it is like, okay, if I do my hypertrophy work right after just that top single and those lighter back downs or whatever, I can probably push that a lot harder than if it's, okay, I already squatted once this week. I did my back downs. I squatted on my secondary day. I did my back downs. Man, I don't care about pushing this hack squat. You're not going to want to push it hard. You know what I mean? That's part of it. And that's also why these definitions matter, because I think sometimes people associate certain days with certain things. Oh, primary means it has to be super high intensity, super low reps. So you got to have like, your 5x3 back downs at 80%. Oh, it's a secondary day. So secondary day means volume. So it has to be all volume, all my hypertrophy on secondary. Like, that's not what secondary means. Secondary simply means second in order relative to the primary. What your secondary day looks like is relative to what you need for your primary.
Yeah. Yeah. And how you mentioned that changes for different people. Like if you've tried it and you don't fit into that, like, nah, I can't push the intensity on the second day. I need the volume, and it's not even going to be high RPE volume because I feel trash. That's like what I'm more like. I cannot do 2 in one week where I'm pushing hard. Other people, they lose their skill. Like, it's like, how did you forget how to squat in 3 days? Like, what happened to you? And that's just how it is for different people. And so you learn that over time, and coaches, like we sort of understand that. And that's where it's impossible to make like the perfect template or anything like that, because it doesn't work. But as you mentioned as well, you have to start somewhere with people, and there are some general coaching heuristics that we bring to the table. How long have you been doing this, Marcellus? I don't know exactly when you started coaching, but when did you start, and who were some of your early influences that helped you like find your way to what you've been describing?
Yeah, so I've been powerlifting for 10 years. I started in 2015. I technically discovered powerlifting in high school, my senior year, but it was equipped. And like quick little background story. So I would work out with the football team a lot because the head coach was someone I was close to, and he was into working out, and he'll work out with the football team. And then one of the other coaches came in and is like, man, so you working here all the time. You should do the powerlifting team. And I was like, oh, powerlifting, what's that? They're like, oh, you squat, bench, and deadlift. And I wasn't deadlifting at the time, so I didn't really know what that was. But like, you do these 3 things together, you get a total. I'm like, oh, that sounds awesome. Yeah, come to our practice. I go to the practice. And he's like, oh, you put this on. I'm like, what is this? And it was a bench shirt. He's like, yeah, just put this on to meet us in there. It took me 20 minutes to get that thing on by myself. And once I did, I took it off. I went into the coach, handed back. I said, nah, this isn't for me. Because I was like, what is this? Like, this isn't how you bench this. I didn't know anything about it quickly like that. But then later, my junior year in college in 2015 is when I discovered raw powerlifting, and I helped start the UNT powerlifting team and all that kind of stuff. So I've been powerlifting for 10 years, and I've been training as far as being a certified trainer for 10 years. And I got my degree in kinesiology back in 2016. As far as powerlifting specifically, I got more into powerlifting specific coaching in 2017. So I've been doing it for 8 years. As far as my early influences, so funnily enough, so I did not know who anybody in powerlifting was as far as big name coaches or programmers or that type of stuff until like 2019, like late 2018, 2019. I had no clue who, TSA, TSG, RTS, Joey, I didn't know who any of these guys were because all the YouTube that I watched, and I think part of it is because all the YouTube that I watched on YouTube Fitness was pretty much informative stuff. And a lot of these guys weren't putting out informative content like that on YouTube. They were maybe on Instagram, but I didn't even know who you were. I couldn't look at your Instagram. So a lot of the stuff I was watching on YouTube was like Chris Jones, Omar Issa, Matt Ogus, stuff like that. That's what I was watching, right? And a lot of stuff that I was learning about, like general training, like periodization, like the individualized periodization and conjugate and things like that, was just from watching YouTube videos. I didn't have any very big like influences in my initial phases of things, right? But pretty much I just learned a lot of the basics of general strength training and hypertrophy. And with a lot of those general strength training and hypertrophy, things were done in, 4-week block formats. And it was more of a linear phase. Like, hey, here's your hypertrophy block, and then here's like your transition block, and here's your intensity block, right? I learned more about stuff like that. But then when I got my first powerlifting coach in 2018, a guy named Brendan Teets, he's the one that kind of showed me more about working on all those aspects at once, right? And even though he's not really as big in the powerlifting scene as much anymore, and we had to part ways because crazy stuff, but I always tell people I'm always grateful for the time that I had with him, though, because he took a lot of the stuff that I was already doing and thinking and kind of confirmed me and like, no, this makes sense. Because a lot of the traditional powerlifting stuff that I was looking at, where they would be like, okay, super high volume phases, and then you go down intensity phases, it just didn't make a whole lot of sense to me initially, because what I was finding was like, okay, if I start off with, say, like, let's just say 3x7 on this day, and then by block 3 or 4, it's like a 3x3. It's like a different program. Like the stimulus isn't even the same. It's like, yeah, they felt good at first when I pulled back for like a week because they were tapered, but then by the end of the block they feel flat, and I'm just like, well, why do I have to take this stuff away? Like, why do I have to make all these changes? And he was just like, you don't have to. Like, don't. He's like, and the way he described it was really good. He said, intensity dictates the type of adaptations that you're going to get. Volume dictates the magnitude of adaptations. So when you are starting to cut back and pull back that volume so excessively, you are changing the very stimulus that was probably having them feel good in the first place. That's why, I felt great on my triples block, hitting my PR triples. But then with each block, as you're pulling more of that volume away, you think, oh, I'm bumping the intensity, it's making up for it. But it's not. A 3x3 at 80% is simply not the same thing as a 3x7 at 70%. It's just not the same workload, right? So he was somebody where just being coached by him definitely helped me to kind of find more of the way that I like to structure things. And then my current coach that I've been with since 2019, Brad Couliard, he helped me in terms of just a lot of my critical thinking processes and like asking questions on the primary day, like, okay, yeah, this moved bad, but like, let's get into more detail. Like, was the weight heavy on your back or heavy in your hands? Okay, that might be more of an intensity thing you need on the secondary day. Were you lacking pop off the chest or pop out of the hole? Okay, that might be more of a volume thing, whether in the form of accessories or the big three itself. Okay, yeah, I felt strong, I felt poppy, but it took so many more to fill in groove. Okay, that might be an exposure thing, right? He kind of helped me with that. But in terms of my mentality with a lot of the sub-max stuff and the emphasis on accessory stuff like that, a lot of that wasn't really influenced by anybody. It was kind of just based upon like just the way that I trained and the way and the mentality of like, well, yeah, obviously I can't go heavy on my top set, kill myself on my back downs, because then I can't do my accessories. And in my mind back then, that's not even an option. Like, it's like not doing accessories is an option. So it's like, okay, well then naturally I got to go heavy on the heavier sets, my top set. I'll just go lighter on the back down so that I can have energy for the accessory work. And that just made sense to me. And then a lot of my systems were things that I was kind of forced to develop just for the exposure of athletes I was working with. Like when I started working with people like Michael C., who at the time, was in contention with Austin Perkins and Taylor Atwood, it's okay, this guy's weighs the same as me, he's a 74 kg lifter, but he's pulling almost 700 pounds. He's squatting in the 6s. He's in the mid 400s on benches. Like, okay, when I look at the numbers with the normal percentages, this just looks like too much. So let me just do a lighter percentage. Like why? Like it's an arbitrary rule to say, oh, it has to be 70%. Well, why? 60% for him is still like in the mid 300s on bench. That's a lot of weight to be repping. So stuff like that, working with, Jamar, Ashton, Bob, you start to figure these things out where it's like, okay, the way I have to approach workload has to be different with these guys because of like the sheer amount of weight they're lifting. But then I started thinking like, okay, well, yeah, they're lifting a lot of weight, but that's relative to their genetic top end. This guy who's lifting only squatting 400 pounds, that's still a lot of weight relative to his top end. So why can't the same principles apply to him? So I tried it. I'll never forget it. I think this was like in 2020 and 2021, but Ashton basically would come in. This was before I started doing things like ranges for the top sets and look at relative percentage. Like, oh, hey, hit between 90 and 95% on week 3, you're good for week 4. I was having a lot of my back downs be assigned low, but I was letting top sets be RP based. Ashton would consistently come in, hit his RP7 on week 3. He would kill it. It would be smoke. It was objectively an RP7. He comes in for week 4 for his RP8, and it's like he barely beats what he did on week 3, or he doesn't at all. And I'm just sitting here like, it's true, the RPE. I don't understand, but I'm just like, well, you know what? His week 3 was like 780 pounds. Maybe it's just too much weight. Like, let me just cap off. And I remember telling him, hey man, look, let's just go lighter. Like, I'm gonna start giving you ranges, meaning this is the range of where I want you to be. I don't care if it's under the RP. If you hit the highest on the RP, just stop there. And then let's see what you can do on the week 4. And it worked instantly. He blew it up. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense, because even if it's a true RP7, RPE is, I don't want to say it's irrelevant. RP is a great tool for guiding load progression and managing fatigue, but it's not the end all be all. At the end of the day, the weight on the bar has a certain fatigue cost regardless of what the exertion is, right? And if you're hitting like 98, 99% of week 3 of what you want to hit on week 4, you're probably not going to have too much left by the time the week 4 comes. So I started, pacing things out with relative percentages with him. And then I had a client named Kai at the time who was just trying to hit 1,000-pound total. And I'm like, let me do the same thing with him. Like, the numbers are going to look very different, obviously, because 90% of 800 pounds is going to be very different than 9% of like 420. But let me just take the same approach with them and just run it together and see how it works. And it worked well for both of them. Their week 4 showed up very well. And that's when I realized, okay, it's all about stimulus. It's like, and so I started doing this with all my clients and tracking it over years. And now I have very specific numbers. So I think Ashton went over it with you guys to a certain degree. So pretty much what I've determined is on a squat for week 3 going into week 4, even for a last warm up into a top set, so long as that week 3 range is between 90 and 95% of the end goal of week 4, that tends to be enough stimulus. For bench press, if it's between 92 and 97%, that tends to be enough stimulus. For sumo deadlift, between 90 and 95%. For conventional, between 88 and 92%. Now, where someone falls within that spectrum, I like to start on the lower end of it and then just ramp it up as needed, because some people, like you said, they need to have the skill of feeling the heavy weight on their back. So they might be close to that 95%. But somebody like Ashton might just be like, yo, so long as it's just heavy enough for me to prepare, I'm good. It might be closer to 90%, right? It just depends. Like Ashton is closer to 90%. Bob is a little bit closer to, say, like 93, 94%. But that makes sense for both of them. Ashton's better leverage to squat. So long as the weight's heavy enough to kind of simulate some of that whip, he's good. He's ready to go. Bob isn't necessarily as leverage well for it. So feeling the heavier load makes him feel better prepared on the week 4. So he's closer to that 94%. But for both of them, when you start getting past 95%, it's like, okay, you have this physical preparedness, but now there's fatigue cost that comes with it that might leak into the week 4 that you didn't have to have, right? So a lot of what I have with systems in terms of, it's funny because it's stuff that's so popularized now and other people even do it. Like, oh yeah, I do the crap jumps. I do the big jumps from week to week, or I do the crap jumps on the platform. When I was first doing that, bro, people were crapping on me so badly. They're like, bro, this is crazy. This is so risky. It's not going to work. And then it works, and it keeps working, and it keeps working. Eventually, like, okay, there's got to be something to this. And when I started finally putting numbers to it, people were more accepting of it. I'm like, you guys are getting too caught up on the kilo aspect of it, right? Like if you have somebody jump from, say, let's say their high end is 140 kilos, right? If you have them jump from 130 to 140, nobody bats an eye at that. It's just 10 kilos, right? If I have someone jump from 250 or 252 and a half to 272 and a half, oh my gosh, it's going from 551 to 600. That's too big a jump. It's the same thing. They both make the same percent jump. They both were in like that low 90% range. It's the same thing. Obviously, the loads, the jumps will look crazier the stronger somebody is, but don't look at it in terms of kilo jumps. My goal isn't like, what's the craziest jump I can make? My goal is, what's the lightest weight I can take for them to feel prepared for what they want to hit on the 3rd or what they want to hit on the week 4, but just heavy enough to gauge what's there, but no heavier than that. Because if it's heavy enough to gauge what's there and it prepares them for it, we're good to go. Anything we do beyond that is just going to tax what we want on the top end. So that's, a lot of the stuff that I came up with has just been for trial and error, and always like, okay, I have to take these basic principles I know to be true and figure out how to apply it to this lifter because the traditional way is not working, right? So
yeah, I'm thinking of people in IPF worlds that I saw when I competed, and they were strong, like mid 600 squatters in the 105s, and they were taking like 10 kilo, 7.5 kilo, 5 kilo, and that was their 3 attempts. And I looked at it, I was like, that's nuts. Like all of those were effectively like 3rd attempts almost. Like, of course you're tired. What's going on here? And even like I didn't know it was taking crap jumps. I'm going to start using that because that's what I'm planning on that I have coming up, because I'm just like, I'm going to be too tired. I'm old now. Maybe I took it as an old thing, but it probably would have worked well anytime. Because, and this is some Ashton called it out, objectively, you'll be more tired if your jumps are closer to each other. So if you can make bigger jumps, you will objectively be less tired because you've done less. And that's just so obvious. the piece that's I think the thing that does scare some people, and even with some athletes, I would advise them differently to take jumps closer together, is if they're super in their head and they just can't handle, like Ashton's, I loved his expression of putting your back to the ocean sort of thing, and just like, you're just going to go for it. And you can, and you trust you can, and you've done all the things. It's not just blind faith or anything. Like, you've done the things that you know will work to get you there over and over. But yeah, I mean, shoot, 10% jump for Ashton in any given week in an exposure is like 80 pounds. And so, yeah, that's
exactly
720 to his 800-pound squat. And how'd you jump that much? Well, it's a 10% thing, man. It's not crazy when you think about it.
And you practice how you play. Like, I would never take someone who's used to smaller jumps in training and then just do this on meet days. Like, we do this in training because you also, one, I as the coach, I need to be able to visually tell what you have based off this lighter second. So we need to do it in training, and you need to be able to gauge how you feel. And that's why the percentages matter, because like people say like, okay, well, why not go to a further extreme? Why 90, 95% on the squat? Why not 88? Why not 87? Well, because they get to a point where, you're going to smoke the second, but you have no idea what's there for the third. Your second's so fast where you assume the high end is there, but that wasn't heavy enough to really let you know, right? So you got to practice how you play. But then one of the biggest things that people used to, not as much now, because like anything, if you do it enough and successful enough, people go from hating it to loving it, right? But one of the biggest pushbacks I would give would be like, okay, but like, if you go so long your second, what if you fail your third? I'm like, oh, you're planning to fail. That's the difference between us. Like, you're making your game plan as, we got to go heavy on the second, because what if we miss the third? I'm looking at it as like, I'm going to go just heavy enough on the second to maximize that high end on the third, because that can be the make or break between winning worlds or not. So it's like,
you guys tried not missing your thirds?
Yeah, no, honestly, it's like, and that's where more game day type planning comes in. Like, this is something that I've refined more the past year or two. That's made a huge difference with going from an average of, okay, maybe 7 for 9, 8 for 9 to more often 9 for 9 or 8 for 9. Is when it comes to the game planning of option 3A, 3B, 3C, I no longer go, do I think you're good enough for 3A? Do I think you have more than 3A? If so, I will load 3A. If I think you're good for 3A at most, I'm defaulting to 3B, just to ensure that you get that. On deadlift, it can be a little bit different. You might be going for placing or whatever, but I found that looking at it that way, it's a lot easier to gauge as a coach and as a lifter, because it might be like, okay, do I for sure have this number? I think I'm 99% sure, but you know if you're good for more than it or not. If it's like, no, I'm not good for more than that, because that would be it at most, okay, I'm going to go 3B, because then you should be able to for sure get that. But if it's like, bro, I could smoke 5 kg over the 3A today, cool, we're not going to do that. We're just going to take the 3A because you're good for it. So there's lots of things you can build in to make these plans work more efficiently.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, to just, like you said, you're going to train the way that you're going to compete. And if you don't do that, you're guessing. Like, that might as well be program hopping and hoping it's going to work out. Like, you're changing fees, you're changing programs. It's not going to work out. And it takes time to learn that. Again, as you said, like, as a coach and as a lifter, if you're out there listening, you don't have a coach, you need to be paying attention to your training. You need to be tracking your training, looking at some of these things. You're not going to accidentally just like luck into this stuff. You're going to have to plan, and that's how you're going to really refine what you're doing.
Absolutely. And
Kristen,
I was going to say, and just remember that this is just a tool. I'm not telling everybody to start doing this. All of my clients don't do this. I'm very big on, don't be married to tools, be married to progress, right? A good craftsman doesn't dismiss any tool. I have some stuff where I do it super rarely, but I don't ever dismiss it altogether, because there are times where I do it. I may have a tool that I use more often because I see success with it more often. But it's like, I mean, like Jamar's a great example. We don't necessarily do the bigger jumps with him. We kind of do smaller jumps than what people would expect for a squat, because we know that makes him feel good. So just to keep that in mind. Anytime I put anything out on YouTube, probably now a podcast, to let people know, like, hey, context always matters. Don't take a tool you heard and be like, I'm gonna do this with all my clients now. Like, evaluate the tool. Why is it useful? Does it make sense for this person? And don't try to fix what's not broken. So
yeah, it's one of the things that we tried to do at Evolve as a team with the progressions. And we talked obviously with you, and we talked with Ashton and Sean. And what we've realized is there's just no way to nail any of this the first time. Any coach you go to, no matter how expensive or experienced they are, they start somewhere with usually very good training heuristics. But then the plan diverges from there into like thousands or tens of thousands of different ways in which it might work, which only happens through trial and error. But if you're paying attention, you can really whittle that down pretty quickly. And it honestly is a lot of common sense, honestly, if you just get out of the tribalism that sometimes is there. or that one person that has the perfect plan and you must do it that way. Like, nah, let's just use some common sense where we're like, okay, we have as much as we can do. We have this much fatigue. Let's make a plan that actually works and feels good instead of looks good on paper, but can't be accomplished or we can't do it. And that being present is really, I think, critical for being a coach and not getting, so stuck in your own hype and ego that you're trying to fit your clients into your system rather than trying to figure out where they're at, pay attention to them.
Yeah. Powerlifters suck at that. I'm not going to lie. Like they're so big on, and obviously, like, I'm not separately, I'm not a prophet, I am, but I just think because of my background, the way I approach it is just very different. I think the way you're going to think about powerlifting, if powerlifting is the first thing you do with a barbell, it's going to be very different than if you had years just doing a bunch of random crap and then getting into powerlifting. And I think that's why the pendulum is always swinging, right? Like right now, low volume accessory work is all the rage. It's like, oh, this is the new meta. Like, bro, this was out like 8 years ago. It's just swinging back and forth. People are doing a bunch of junk volume. Now they're doing super high exertion, low volume. It's like, it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can just, be more moderate or be like, hey, this makes sense for you because you only have so much time. So yeah, you're just gonna have 2 sets of 8. Hey, you have more time and you like pushing your accessories. You're gonna have 3 sets of 12. It's like, you don't have to fit everything into a nice, neat little box. I'm very big on, so long as you're following objective principles that are true and effective, how you apply those principles is completely relative to the individual. I think that's something that's allowed me to, I would not have grown to where I'm at with coaching, nor be able to work the amount of lifters I work with if I was so fixed on just, this is how you always have to do it. Like, it just would not work. There's too many clients that I have where my traditional methods or norms just would not work.
I always say, like, coaches in full in general, like, we have no idea when you are introduced to like your new client, you're like, well, we're gonna try this. Like, this is, based off of your training age, body weight, things like that. Like, from my previous experience, this is what seems to work. And then it's like, then you have to figure out, like, through, like Garrett said, trial and error. So I think a good coach just figures that out a little bit sooner.
Yes.
Or gets that faster. But like, other than that, like, none of us are, we're like, oh, well, let's try this. This works, and it worked last time, so hopefully it works again.
Absolutely. That's why having systems is good. I don't like the idea of coaches being like, oh, I'm just an open book. I don't have anything that I like to do. Then you're not a good coach. You need something that you start with, right? But then the key is from that structure, okay, I will adapt it and style it to the lifter over time. But I mean, that's 100%, Kristen. It's like, I've had some people where I'm like, okay, on paper, this should make sense. And sometimes it does. Hey, we're PR in the first 1 to 3 blocks. I've other people who's like, on paper, this should make sense. Wow, this is garbage. This is not working at all. Like, we gotta change some things up. But like you said, the more experience you get, the more knowledge you have, you're able to figure those things out quicker. You kind of know what to look for and what to ask. And so you're able to get those results a lot faster. And that's something I was talking to a client named Sam about this the other day, where he's like, man, sometimes when clients go to you, it seems like they're hitting PRs by the end of the training cycle. And other times it seems like they're hitting PRs in that first block. How are you getting them so strong in the first block? I'm like, well, some people are stronger than what they realize. It's just the organization of their workload was so poor, they were suppressing it. And you just so happen to find a good structure that first block. But that doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
I can't think of any client where the planning and the original plan stayed the same.
Just worked perfect and you never had to make any changes.
For even one time.
I tell people, Ashton, like, a lot of my clients, even though there's changes made, you can see similarities training cycle to training cycle. Ashton's the exception. Ashton has not had a single macro together where it's looked the same as the previous. We might take some bits and pieces, but we've not been able to keep anything the same because his lifestyle is always changing. There's sometimes where it's like, oh man, you got like these 3 to 4 months of no crazy military physical activity. You're on your small little break from, oh, we're going to go crazy. We're going to get super specific. But then the next time it's like, oh, hey man, I've got a running test this week, a swimming test the next week. Oh, I got to, do this exam. Oh, I got to go drive 2 hours away for my clinicals and this and that. Just like, all right, bro. So working with Ashton is, I tell this all the time, like, and I thank God for this, like, working with some of these individuals, these high level lifters, is actually just maybe a lot better at working with people who aren't as advanced, because I have clients who are nurses, police officers, firefighters, and it's so easy. It's like they come so concerned, like, oh, I hope you work with my schedule. I'm like, I can work with any schedule. I promise you. Like, it's good. We're gonna be fine.
For sure. Well, as you mentioned that, you said there, you thank God you are a man of faith, and you're very vocal about that in your posts. It seems like after every major meet, when you're putting up client success and how things were going, you're always giving glory to God. And I wanted you to speak a little to that, to get a little look behind the curtain on Marcellus, outside of just powerlifting coach, about how faith has impacted both how you lift, how you view this pursuit of strength, and how you view your work as a coach and your obligations to your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best place to start with it, I guess. So for me, and I thank God for this, for the parents that He gave me, because just very transparently speaking, being an African American growing up in America, right? There's a lot of ideas of what you're supposed to be, how you're supposed to act. Like it's kind of like some people may think like, oh, you're more hood, or like if you're more educated, it's like, oh, you speak white, you act white. There's all these different things that people try to place on you, and beyond just race, I think everybody to some level goes through that. Whether it's your family, your parents, your friend groups, people put expectations on what you're supposed to be. I'm very grateful that I grew up with parents, who were Christian and raised me in the Christian faith, and their whole thing was always like you are first and foremost like a follower of Christ. You're a Christian, right? That's the only thing you validate yourself through. They're like, you can't validate yourself through your money, because your money can be taken away. You can't validate yourself through your friends, because they can leave you. You can't validate yourself through us as your parents, because God forbid we can die and we're gone. You know what I mean? It's like, you can't validate yourself through your race, because they literally like, what are you gonna do if you just woke up white one day? You know what I mean? It's like you can't validate yourself through they said validate yourself through your race, the same thing as validate yourself through your height. It's a physical attribute. It doesn't make sense, right? But for me, it's like who I am in Christ, that can't be taken away. That is something that is secure and eternal forever. So because of that, I've always grown up with this mentality of like, okay, in everything that I do it to the glory of God. As it says in 1 Corinthians, I believe it's chapter 10, and all we do to the glory of God. So for me, even at a young age, it's like, okay, when I go to school, right, the reason why I'm going to try to study hard and get straight A's and make sure I don't cheat and stuff like that, even if the opportunity is there and I won't get caught, it's for no other reason than like, this brings glory to God. Like getting these good grades, that brings glory to God. Doing my best for my best foot forward, that brings glory to God, right? And I've tried to, the best of my ability, apply that with everything in my life. Not in the sense of earning more of His love, earning more of His favor, but rather because He already loves me, and because of what Christ has done, I already have favor. It's like, okay, well then out of love, right? It's kind of, it's like my dad, right? I know, like my earthly dad, my dad loves me no matter what. I've made mistakes, I've missed it, I've done things I shouldn't have done, but He loves me no matter what, right? And because of that love that He instilled in me, it's like, I want to make my dad proud, right? So it's the same thing. It's like, I want to make my Heavenly Father proud. So in terms of how that's impacted me with powerlifting, so fun fact, before I got into personal training, I thought personal training was a scam. Before I got into online coaching, I thought online coaching was a scam. I was like, there's no way you can do this as a valid, legit business, bro. Like, because everything that I hear and see is always like, it seems legit, then there's some scandal, some skeletons in the closet, blah, blah, blah. But then I got involved in personal training, and I'm like, oh, wow, I really like this. I really enjoy this. Like, there's something about, giving somebody tools that can help them be healthy for the rest of their life, and seeing them go from struggling to do like, squatting the barbell to hitting PRs. And it's just very satisfying, right? To help somebody in that way. I'm also very big on the idea, like, your life is your ministry. You don't have to be behind a pulpit to, show the love of Christ and show the way that we're supposed to walk and live. So for those reasons, when I got involved in online coaching, she was my girlfriend then, but now wife, Amber. I remember telling her, like, hey, I want to do this a very specific way. I want to do this the right way. And I'm asking you from this day forward to hold me accountable, to where if you see that I'm slacking, if I'm cutting corners, if I'm doing things that are more unethical, call me out on it. Because the moment that happens, I'm quitting, because I don't want to do this thing if it's going to take away from my values and trying to once again bring glory to God. So in the way that has impacted my coaching, it's literally defined everything I've done with coaching. Like, in all my years doing this, despite the big roster I've worked with, one of the things that's helped me grow so much, people are like, yeah, man. I mean, like Kristen brought up before with my client, Kelly, Ashton, something like, yeah, Marcellus has never not gotten back to me on time. He's never been late on a block. It's not that I haven't had moments where I've been tempted to, right? Like, look, I have 2 kids now. Like, I have 2 kids. I have my own training. I have a full-time roster. I have a lot of responsibilities and obligations. I've had those moments where it's like, man, I'm tired. You know what? I've been doing this the right way for so many years. If I if I send them the block the morning of, instead of the day before, they're not going to drop me over. It's not a big deal. I've had those moments where it's like, oh man, I'm almost at the 24-hour mark. But if I respond in 26 hours, it's not that big. I've had those moments of thinking about that. But the reason why I've never done it is because, well, no, at the end of the day, this person is trusting me with their money, their time, their effort, their goals. And we came to an agreement that's based upon what I laid out for myself, because I'm the coach, that, hey, you will get a response within 24 hours. Hey, you will get a response in the office hours. I will everything. But that is the agreement that I set. If things are getting to a point where I need more time, then I can always change that agreement and let all my clients know. But until I do so, right, I need to uphold the agreement that we set. Why? Not because they'll drop me over it, because at this point they probably wouldn't. They probably be like, oh, I get it, man. Yeah, because I understand. Not because there's anybody else that would know about it. Some of them are going to necessarily go blast on social media, but because it's like, but I know that this does not bring glory to God if I don't honor my obligations, right? And the fact also of being a powerlifter myself and knowing the experience I have of my coach, I always think, well, how would I feel, despite the fact that I know my coach is busy as kids, if he was late on my block that I'm paying for, that I'm, and if he's not giving me communication that I'm expecting, right? So it really comes down to remembering that, like, yes, it's a business. Yes, I'm making money, but I'm not dealing with objects. These are people. These are people that are, made in the image of God. That's what I believe. And then because of that, showing like that love, that honor, that respect, that's how I want to go about carrying it. And the coolest thing about me in the powerlifting sphere is like the amount of, friends or clients or followers that have reached out to me to ask about the gospel and express these things. And what they always say is like, yeah, man, it's just the way you carry yourself. Or like, I hear all these things. I hear these good things about you. And I don't take credit for that for myself, because me and myself, I would happily sometimes be late on blocks or not get back on clients. Cause like, yeah, man, my baby was just screaming for 4 hours. I don't feel like doing this. But because I remember that it's like, hey, it's the Lord I who live, but Christ who lives in me, I truly, I walk that out. So it has everything to do with how I run business. It has everything to do with the way that I approach things in terms of making sure my clients feel like they're people first, right? You're not just a number. You're not just a paycheck. And I mean, shoot, let's be honest. There's been a lot of times where certain coaches have been called out for certain things, and there's been skeletons in their closet that's done a lot of damage, stuff like that. By the grace of God, when people tried that with me, it's not gone down, because there's not really any skeletons in the closet, because it's like, I've really tried to do this the right way, right? And that's all because of my faith. That's all because of my walk with God. If not for that, it's easy to cut corners, because it's like, okay, well, if nobody's watching and if no one's going to know but you, then it's like, why not? You know what I mean? So that's been a big thing for me. And once again, not out of like a sense of fear, like, oh man, if you lay on this block, God's going to smite you, bro. You better like not be like, it's nothing like that. But it's just like, it's almost like it's just the natural thing to do, right? It's like, I think about the fact that, like, Christ suffered and died for me. I can suffer through a little bit of lack of sleep and get this client's block out on time. So I know it's kind of a long answer, but I mean, for me, it really is everything. Like, it's like, because of who I am in Christ, I want to be the best coach I can be. I want to be the best powerlifter I can be. I want to be the best husband I can be. I want to be the best father I can be. Like, everything stems from that first and foremost for me.
Yeah. I think that's really powerful. The word that comes to mind as you describe that is integrity. And by that, I just mean that you're the same everywhere all the time. There's no public self, no private self. It's that you're the same no matter where you are, because you have a settled identity. And you talked about, not serving out of fear, but instead responding in love for what's already been given. And that's an identity you seem really settled in, and are bringing a lot of, I think, value, and a lot of, you just look at your clients and the way that they talk about you, you're bringing good things in, and you're doing that for the glory of God. So thanks so much for sharing a little bit more, like, behind your heart about what this means beyond just a business or beyond a passion or a hobby, or, however people think about lifting, that you're really expressing who you are. And I hope everybody can find that they are settled in who they are, and they feel comfortable not only talking about that, but living it out in all aspects of their life. So thanks a lot for sharing that.
Yeah, Marcellus, this was a great chat. I think that a lot of people are going to get a lot of great information out of this. So thank you for taking the time to share that with us. If for those who are listening, like and subscribe or share this with your friends. You can always find Marcellus at the Swolefessor, but I'm pretty sure that everyone already knows you on there anyway. So thanks again. And yeah, this was great.
No problem. I appreciate y'all for having me on. Enjoyed the conversation, enjoyed the questions. And I mean, like we're talking about, this is our first time having an actual conversation like this, which is crazy because we've known each other, I think, for like years through social media.
Forever,
so like, yeah, like for like since 2018 at least, because that's when I figured out who everybody was.
But 7 years, so 7 years,
yeah. So no,
but this is our first conversation, or like our first real conversation. I think I've like talked to you on DMs and stuff, but that's like the extent of it. So
yeah,
thank you for thanks for this.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Thank you.
It's been great. Thanks so much. Appreciate you, Marcellus. All right, before you leave, we'll cut the recording here. I have one unrelated thing. I was talking to here we go.